Well, listen, ladies and gentlemen, let's get right into the nitty gritty, so to speak. Fuzzy Belvedere, Black Myth Wukong is a game that was shown off, and it really did impress when it was originally shown. Like a lot of us were like, "Wow, that is something special." The bosses looked great. The combat looked fast. And it's, listen, the game looks amazing. But one of the big things that came out of Black Myth Wukong's release was that it was originally announced that it was going to be on multiple platforms. And, well, like many things before it, Sony got involved and locked it up for a year. Now, there's going to be some people in this chat potentially, or anyone that re-watches the video on demand, that are going to write in the chat or write in, in the YouTube messages that no, Game Science said that they didn't do it and it was the Series S's fault. Look, if you believe that I have a bridge here in New York to sell you and it's only going to cost you about 5 figures, if you want that bridge, DM me and we'll work out a deal. I'll get the deed to you ASAP. Okay. I don't believe it. I never believed it. I thought it was hogwash from start to finish. And look, let me just rip this Band-Aid right off and tell you this. No, I am not buying Black Myth Wukong at full price. I might buy it when it's like $20 digitally, when it's, on its last leg of sale. But I'm not paying full boat for it. And I'm not being spiteful. I have so many games to play right now that it would literally be wasting my money. And here's the thing. If Game Science would have been forthcoming, would have been honest and potentially earnest and said, hey, look, we made a deal and Sony locked it up for a year. We're working closely with Xbox to get it perfected in that time. So when it releases on Series X, it runs perfect. When it releases on Series S, there'll be no issues. But Fuzzy Belvedere, that's not what they said. They were out front and they absolutely 1,000% blamed the Xbox Series S for the holdup. Now, we know that the way it works with Microsoft, they don't have a release on one and not the other, meaning that it wouldn't come to Series X only and at some point release on Series S. That's not the way it works. You get it to work on both consoles and then you release it, and that's how the magic works. We heard specifically from Microsoft, and I'm going to go find that quote right now while I hand you over the microphone, Fuzzy, exactly on what they said. And the way it's worded is very pointed, basically telling you that it's not our fault, but it's theirs, without actually saying it's their fault and not ours. Fuzzy Belvedere, this is one of those games that has been really in the limelight for what it looks like the developer lied. And the one thing that gamers do not accept, or at least I certainly don't accept, is being lied to. Listen, if you have a deal and the deal is the best for you and your company, make that deal. You don't owe me a singular thing. What I will not accept and what I will stand my ground on and vote with my wallet ultimately is not buy your product. And that's what I'm doing now. I think personally that Black Myth Wukong coming out a year later with the controversy surrounding it, and I think it's going to struggle. I'm not saying this is what I want to happen. You'll never hear me specifically say, I hope Dev A fails because of B situation. Listen, they lied, ladies and gentlemen. Whether you believe it or you don't, that's fine. I'm not going to argue with you. Have your point, but I'm allowed to have mine. And my point is that they lied from inception. They know they lied. Sony locked this up like they've done so many times before. And what this is ultimately going to do, like so many times before for the Belvedere, is because of the exclusivity deal, specifically 1 year to the day, right? Oddly enough, that's when August 20th of last year, it came out on Sony. 1 year later, oh, look at that. It's on Xbox Series X and S being blamed as, wow, we really struggled as a developer to get this on Series S. I want to get your thoughts on this, man. Are you day one on this, or are you inundated with so many games that it's just off of your radar?
Well, and this will probably lead to why I eventually picked it up, but I already have it on PC, and I'm not picking it up on Xbox. And it's not to spite them or anything like that, but I wanted to check a few things out. And me being on PC as well as on console, for them to say that, oh, they struggled getting it on the Series S, but yet somehow made it work on the Steam Deck. I'm not the most technical guy, but any developer that tells you that they can't get something to work on the Series S, but gets it to work on the Steam Deck is full of either BS or they're not following the dev kit, instructions as far as how you pare it down from the Series X build. I don't know. I'm like I said, I'm not a developer, but it is extremely strange to me how you can get something that was, and let's be honest, it even struggled on the PS5. Let's just be clear on it, between the blurriness and some of the choppiness, which even some PCs has some choppiness with it, but it manages to do a 30 frames mode on the Steam Deck. Then there should be no issue with the Series S. The Series S is a more powerful piece of hardware than the Steam Deck. So when you look at memory, when you look at the overall setup, it shouldn't be a problem to pare it down from the Series X. If you can get it to work on the Series X, you can get it to work on the Series S. Now, will it come into some possible issues if you're trying to run 1440 versus paring it down to adjustable up to 1080? Yeah, it can be somewhat of a factor if you have either a lot of NPCs loaded and you're doing a split screen mode, or a variety of other things that are going to take up more of the memory bank that is limited on the Series S. But that's where you're supposed to pare down the overall visuals, bring down the resolution, turn back some of the bells and whistles as far as the load details. But when it comes to what they're doing on the Steam Deck, with it being at a 30 frame, I think you can even do the 45 frame deal, to kind of give that in between where it feels more like a 60 frame setup on that Steam Deck. But once again, you're paring down the draw distance. You're putting some of the level of detail on low, and that allows it to run. And I'm pretty sure people on the Series S, even though some people have theirs hooked to a 4K TV, having it run on an adjustable resolution up to 1080, I think would be substantially or at least enough to satisfy most gamers that would be playing it on the Series S as opposed to a Series X. The 1 year anniversary thing, I know some people have given the excuse, well, it's a special day to them. But that's also usually how contracts work, where it's 1 year or 2 years out from a deal. Some people will say, oh, well, they didn't have anything particularly in writing, but yet Sony tells you that was part of their China deal or whatever they like. A lot of the games that are from that region that have been coming to PlayStation as exclusives, whether it's your Stellar Blades, that one was, I think, more so Korea. But when it comes to things like Phantom Blade Zero, the other Blade game that they're working on that should be coming up here soon, a lot of those have in the contract where they're exclusive for a set amount of time. We just got Stellar Blade on PC a few months ago. So I wouldn't necessarily rule out completely that there isn't something, whether it's in writing or in a handshake. I don't want to steal Will's mention as far as when it comes to the trade of work kind of thing that they engage with same thing that Callisto Protocol. Sony sent their devs over there to help out. Did it make it exclusive? No, but it definitely limited what was available in the Series X, at least at launch, as far as the ray tracing and things like that. So I wouldn't be surprised if they had something unwritten in that regard with their developers helping bring it on console. And as someone that's played it on the PS5, played it on the Steam Deck, this game was never optimized for console. Now, I haven't played it on a PS5 Pro. From what I was hearing initially, it's not doing much better, other than the performance mode is a little bit smoother, but the visuals are not still what you would expect for what it would be on a PS5 Pro. So overall, I don't want to knock them as a developer, but this is an example of a developer being not necessarily inexperienced with console, but being more centric around PC development, probably in their previous ventures. This is a group of developers that have worked for other teams that came together to make this game. So with that being said, if they mainly worked on making PC games, that goes to show why the PC port or the PC version tends to run a bit smoother, although Unreal Engine 5, it still has some of that choppiness, although it's gotten a bit better since the initial launch. But it's one of these things where this developer didn't optimize this as best they could for console. The PS5 console, developing for it is much like the PS4. It's just that you have more overhead room. With the Series X and Series S, it's more in tune with PC development, but a lot of people aren't familiar with how you basically pare down things from the Series X down to the Series S. It's like you would want to take what you put for the Series X and then turn down the load quality and stuff like that. I would say at least one level, if not two levels, and then work your way back up to bringing it more to a smoother, either 60 frame or 30 frame setup in comparison to what the Series X can handle. A lot of developers, even the ones that made Baldur's Gate 3, had some issue, I guess, thinking or not really thinking, but adjusting to that console in that regard, or that development method in that regard to console. But once they understood, I guess, some of the engineers over at Xbox had to hold their hand through it. They actually realized that what they were doing before wasn't the best way of doing things. And it actually, the Series S development allowed them to uplift, I think it was like between 20 and 30%, all of the other platform, versions that they released for, like what they were making for the Series X, as well as what they made for the PS5. So it goes to show it's not as much that the Series S is crippling. It's if you're a developer set in your ways from either PS4 development or just strictly PC development, it is a different way of, I guess, approaching things when it comes to handling memory. But aside from that, the dev kit has it where develop it for the Series X, pare it down for the Series S. It should work. If you have a mode like split screen that can tend to be more of a resource hog, that's where you probably should work on the Series S mode first and then build up the Series X mode, which I think that was the case with the Baldur's Gate 3 deal. And that's where they found the more of the uplift for everything else afterwards.
There you go. That's right.
Hey, it's not every developer is as good as the next. Not a slight to them, but hey, I bought this on PC, not buying it again. It runs on the Steam Deck. It shouldn't have had an issue all along on the Series S. I'll leave it at that.
Again, this is one of those opening salvos that there are going to be some people who are like, no, boom, they said. Okay, so, folks, I'm all about that evidence-based conversation. You all know this, right? Like, I'll give you my opinion. And I'll tell you, hey, folks, this is my opinion, right, wrong, or different. If I get it wrong, I'm the first guy up front and center to say, hey, listen, folks, I got it wrong. It's not a problem. But I actually have the quote from Microsoft, and they, Fuzzy, this is where it gets super interesting. Like, Microsoft is literally telling the press, and I'm going to read it verbatim. Here's Microsoft's official stance on the delay regarding the claim that the Series S is to blame. Microsoft has clarified that the delay is not, in all capitals, a result of the Xbox Series S being a limiting factor. They also state that they cannot comment on any potential deals between Game Science and other platform holders, such as PlayStation. Now, I mean, look, again, folks, I'm not going to tell you to buy the game, don't buy the game. I'm not about that life. Listen, I'm not buying the game. That is a me choice. Why am I doing it? Honestly, I am not going to give a developer my money who lied. They straight up lied. They should have just been forthcoming and earnest and said, "Hey, listen, we had a deal with PlayStation and call it a day." No, they try to do it. They try to do it sneaky, and then they got called out to the carpet. Fuzzy Belvedere, like Microsoft, literally comes out and drops a quote that there's no arguing. They literally said, "Oh, it is not because of our hardware, and we cannot comment on deals that they have with other platform holders." That is pretty much all you need to know. But Fuzzy, before we get to topic number 2, I want to get your thoughts on that because, again, I don't see an argument here. They literally, I mean, listen, if Microsoft is not going to lie, do they lie? Do companies lie? Sure. But in a situation like this, the minute the statement was made, Microsoft dropped the presser an hour later.
Yeah.
And they were probably super pissed that Game Science tried to blame the console and thought that they were going to walk away with it. I'm glad Microsoft responded the way they did. And again, it just so happens to be super weird that on the 20th of this month, a year from the day where Sony tries and locks up these one-year deals, it just so happens to be releasing. Again, I personally think that the game is going to suffer. I think a lot of people on Xbox are going to feel a type of way, and they're not going to support this game. But we'll see. What any additional thoughts before we get out of here?
Oh, one quick thing. I do want to make mention when I did purchase it on Steam, it was when they had their big sale where I believe the deluxe edition was below 40, or at least through CD Keys, and that sale I got it for under 40.
Okay.
That was like my price point that I was willing to pay at that point because of the controversy behind it. But along with Microsoft's statement, PlayStation even mentioned that was one of their China project, games. So they had somebody talk to them in reference to that, whether it was the additional development help to get it across the finish line for PlayStation or whatever you want to believe. There was something in works between them and Sony, not just, we're going to put it there first because we can't program for the other one, which it's funny. They were saying it would take years for, the Series S development. They couldn't figure it out, but yet magically it's 1 year later. Like typically things like that would be maybe, the following year. Like they figured it out within a year's time when they were saying before it would take years. I don't know. I don't think Microsoft sent any engineers at that point because I think at that point they were already pissed that they were kind of trying to throw their device under the bus. They've already gone through that with Larian, and Larian had to eat crow in that regard, showing that it was more of a them problem than a device problem. And with was it Chinese room or whatever their or science room, whatever the name of the developer is. I would have to believe at this point that magic 1 year date either goes to show that they ate some crow once they finally figured out, just pare it down from the Series X build, or maybe they figured, well, the contract said this, so we've kind of already had this already ready, and let's just release it, at that contract date.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't say that companies are notorious for lying in reference, but like when they do a direct statement on something like that and usually make a comment like we can't comment on other potential contracts or competition's contracts or things of that nature, that's more of a legal speak. And that's probably as aggressive as they could describe the BS that they were countering for their device being the root of the problem. And like I said, look it up. Series S is more powerful than the Steam Deck. That should give you everything you need to know as far as when it comes to development for those devices.
And that's a great point. I'm glad you bring that up because you absolutely are correct. The Series S is more powerful than the Steam Deck, and if it could run on the Steam Deck, I mean,